Hello people, and welcome to the stream. It's Friday, so we all know what that means. It's Fallout Fridays. It's the new podcast that we've started doing, which is all about everything survival games, survival stories, Fallout games, Fallout stories, nukes everywhere. Anything radioactive. Last week we spoke about most likely apocalypse scenarios to happen. And then the week before, it was Fallout 5 rumours. And this week, it is, as you can tell from the title, truths and myths from the Chernobyl disaster. I'll go for the history of the timeline of how it happened, what happened, and then I'll go into like all the facts and myths that people may not know, myths that people thought were facts. Because there have been quite a few out there which everyone's kind of thought, oh, I thought that was real, or that sort of thing. I thought that really happened, or I thought they were dead, or whatever. Anyway, I need to get our podcast music on, so just a second whilst I turn down Joshua LaRouche and put on this background jazz. I got these songs from YouTube's audio library. I found them quite fitting for Fallout. They had that kind of sound to it. I mean, you could hear this being played in Fallout New Vegas. A lot of the ones are just like general Fallout vibes, that kind of 40s, 50s style music. But yeah, so just off YouTube audio library. So hopefully, won't have any issues when uploading it to YouTube or even when it's on Twitch, because I have been posting the podcasts to YouTube. I think the first one went up yesterday, was supposed to go the other week, but I had issues with editing it, and then the next one's going up tomorrow. I'm going to try and get it so that the stream's on Friday, and then the following week it goes up on the Saturday, so it's not the same week. Kind of makes it exclusive to Twitch for a little bit. It's also just the shortened bit, so it's not the gameplay, it's just the podcast section. What was I saying? Yeah. That was a good thing about not having the gameplay, because when I uploaded, I think it was last week's, copyright strike because of the music in Fallout, which I kind of expected. Anyway, so yes, part of Fallout Fridays, we have to have a beer, and we all know what that means. It's bottle cap collecting. So yes, the first week we did a lager from China, Qingdao, which I have had quite a few times before, and I do enjoy that one. Last week's was Asahi from Japan, and I must admit, it's definitely fighting for that top spot against Browny, which I think maybe not next week after or so. I'll maybe do Browny so that you guys know what I'm talking about, because I keep going on about it, but I haven't tried it yet. On stream, I have tried it in real life, obviously. But yeah, this week it is fitting. I should have really done this on Halloween. It's called Hells from a Camden Town brewery. And the Camden Town brewery is actually quite a recently founded brewery. Founded in 2010, so it's only 10 years old, which is quite different to the Japanese and the Chinese brewery that we tried, which I think the Qingdao brewery was like 110 years old, and the Japanese brewery was, I can't remember, was it 70s or something? Maybe even older than the Chinese one. But yeah, I've never had this one before. I'm like, no, you've just arrived on time for the beer. You knew what was happening. You just had that beer tingle. What was it? Spidey senses, but it's beer senses. So yeah, I have not had this one before. Obviously, all the beers that I try are lagers, because I do prefer lagers to anything. Again, a very strong smell. just like the Asahi one. Right, bottle cap in the collection pot. I'll try and pour it this time without giving it a massive, like, 3-4 centimeter head. It won't go well. We all know this. I'm shit at pouring. Get that some more pouring sound in. I think I may pour it too quick. That's why it bubbles. It's a heavy glass. That's not too bad, I don't think. That's getting better. But yeah, founded in 2010. I think it's quite a small one. It's not one I've seen common around pubs and restaurants and stuff. Camden Town, for anyone who doesn't know, is it's close to London in the UK. So yeah, let's give this a try. Cheers. Oh, well, that's very strong. That's quite a thick beer. It's not the word I'm looking for, but it probably sounds quite rude when I say it like that. It's full-bodied is what I think they call it. A full-bodied beer. Stronger than Asahi and Peroni. I like it, but I wouldn't say they were my favourites. Even though I'm not allowed to drink until late 25th of November. Well, it's on a Friday. We could have a cheers on, if that is a Friday. I don't know if it is. 2010, that is young. I know, for a brewery, that is very young. Although saying that, you do get a lot of microbreweries popping up everywhere at the minute. And like micro pubs and that sort of thing. I've never been to one. I don't know. A micro pub, just, it sounds cramped. It sounds like there'd be nobody there. It sounds like there'd be no atmosphere. Which, if I was going to the pub, you kind of want that atmosphere. That's the whole pub experience. Also, I don't go often. I very rarely go to the pub, but if I do, I prefer to go with a few mates. Or if there's football on, that makes it, that gives us a bit of a laugh as well. It's on a Wednesday. Oh, damn it. Well, the following Friday we'll have a cheers with you, compa. I mean, obviously you're allowed to bring soft drinks. There's no rule against it has to be alcohol. It does not have to be alcohol. It can be soft drinks or whatever you like. But yeah, it's definitely stronger. It's probably one of the stronger tasting lagers that I've had. What's its percentage? 3 units. I think that was less than. I can't remember if that was less than the Asahi one. Somewhere it gives the alcohol percentage. 4.6%. I think the Asahi was 5.2. I might be wrong. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's nice. I don't think I'd choose it though if I had an option of a few different ones. Yeah. If that was the only option I had, I'd happily drink it. Claimed a free copy of... yeah, I've also got a Football Manager 2020. I've never played a Football Manager game before. Not with that official series. I've like got phone, mobile versions of it. Not official versions of it, but like a Football Manager game on my phone. So yeah, I might give that a go this weekend. See what that's like. And then FIFA 2021 comes out October. It's either early October or late September. And I'll probably do a series on Twitch, either a player career or a manager career. My dad played it on his PC like every day, but stopped because his PC couldn't handle it anymore. Wow, I didn't realise it was quite that demanding. I thought it was just like there's a lot of, it is quite texty and plain images, if you know what I mean. Still images. maybe a couple of animations kind of simulating the match. Anyway, it isn't, but he has so many viruses. Oh my god, get that man an antivirus protection. Right, on to today's topic. So yeah, it's Chernobyl, the facts, the myths, the lies, the Russianness to it. So yes, the best place to begin is where is like the history of it, why it happened, how it happened, when it happened. So yes, for anyone that doesn't know about Chernobyl, completely new to it, I'll give an explanation of what happened basically. So yeah, it all happened because they were doing safety tests. Basically, they wanted to see how effectively they could power it down whilst keeping the basically power it down, but producing enough power to keep the coolants running so that it will be safe. Basically, it's quite ironic. Worst nuclear disaster to ever happened whilst they were doing a safety test to stop that sort of thing from happening. Well done, Russia. So yeah, the best place to start is actually the day before the event, because they started preparing for this this safety test the day before. So yeah, they were powering everything down to a point where it will be safe to power it down further. So yes, April 25th, 1986, 1 a.m. Chernobyl's operators begin reducing power at reactor number 4 in preparation for a safety test, which they have timed to coincide with a routine shutdown for maintenance. The test is supposed to determine whether, in the event of a power failure, the plant's still spinning turbines can produce enough electricity to keep coolant pumps running during the brief gap before the emergency generators kick in. Ironically, this safety test brings... yeah, that's basically what I just said. It brings about the reactor's destruction. April 25th, 1986, 2 p.m. Reactor's number 4 emergency core cooling system is disabled to keep it from interfering with the test. Though this doesn't cause the accident, it worsens the impact. At around the same time, the test and shutdown are temporarily delayed to accommodate the region's power needs. So yeah, for anyone that has seen the HBO Chernobyl series, and in that last episode where I'm forgetting his name, the main scientist is explaining on this board what caused the event, and he says one of these factors was that it was running idle at not full capacity, if you will, so it's got left that kind of space to generate these gases in it. April 25th, 1986, 11:10 p.m. Operators received permission to continue with the test and shut down. By now, the less experienced night shift is on the job, which purportedly never received proper instructions on how to perform the test. Always great when you're running a test to make sure you get the best people on the job, not the newbies. It says it in the... I'm trying to remember all the characters in the characters based on real life people, obviously, in the HBO series. I think one of the guys running the safety test in the control room was like 24 and had been in this job about 6 months. Good evening, Mojo, welcome. We're just running through the history of the Chernobyl disaster. So April 26, 1986, 12:28 a.m. So it's just gone midnight, basically. Power plummets too far below the level at which the reactor is considered stable. Operators respond by removing most of the control rods in violation of the plant's safety guidelines, yet they still have trouble raising the power, in part due to a xenon buildup in the core. So yes, the main man in the control room was a bit of a bastard, basically. Whatever they had in the rule book, he was like, no, fuck it, do what I say. Do you know how long I've been in this job? Do you know how many times I've done this safety test? If you don't do as I say, I'm going to report you to the guys at the top, who will just basically execute you. even though apparently that's a myth. They didn't do these kind of executions, which they say so often in the HBO series. April 26, 1986, 1 a.m. The power stabilizes, albeit at lower than preferred level, and plant supervisors order the test to proceed. The automatic emergency shutdown system and other safety features are subsequently turned off. That wasn't great. So yes, an unexpected power surge triggers disaster. April 26, 1986. Do I need to repeat the day? We know what day it is. 1:23 a.m. The test officially begins, and an unexpected power surge occurs. 1:23 and 40 seconds. An operator presses the emergency shutdown button, but the control rods jam as they enter the core. I'm trying to remember the name of the button that they give in the HBO series. I think it's like AZ12 or something like that. And yeah, they explain like this button was doomed from the start. Basically, it was the way that the rods had been built. They had graphite tips, so as soon as that entered the water, it just instantly caused a rise in heat, which just evaporated all that water, created that steam, blew the top off basically. 1:23 and 58 seconds. The first explosion, to be quickly followed by at least one more, blows the 1,000-ton roof right off the reactor and shoots a fireball high into the night sky. A blackout roils. I don't know if that sounds around well. Blackout rolls the plant as the air fills with dust and graphite chunks, and radiation begins spewing out. Walls and equipment collapse, and dozens of fires start up, including one on top of the neighbouring reactor. Despite all evidence to the contrary, the nuclear engineer in charge of the test insists that reactor number 4 is still intact. He later dies of radiation poisoning. That was one of the things that they really showed in the series was there was all these people coming to the heads, the managers and stuff on site, being like, the reactors just exploded, and the managers would just be like, that's impossible, reactors don't explode. Please explain to me how a nuclear reactor explodes. And they're just like, I don't know how, but it has. And the manager's just like, nope, you're seeing things, go to the doctor. 1:28 a.m. The first firefighters arrive at the scene. Wait, how far was this after? Okay, wow, this was only like 5 minutes later, that's quick. The first firefighters are at the scene. They have no knowledge of the radiation and wear no protective clothing. 2:15 a.m. Local Soviet officials convene an emergency meeting at which they decide to block cars from exiting or entering Pripyat, a nearby city that was built to house Chernobyl's workers. Police officers assisting with the roadblock likewise have no knowledge of the radiation and wear no protective clothing. 5 a.m. Officials shut down reactor number 3 to be followed the next morning by reactors number 1 and 2. They are reopened months later. 6:35 a.m. By now all fires have been extinguished except for the blaze in the reactor core, which will burn for days. 10 a.m. Helicopters begin dumping sand. Oh no, sorry. That's on April 27th. 10 a.m. Helicopters begin dumping sand, clay, boron, lead, and dolomite into the burning core in an attempt to slow radioactive emissions. And then it goes into a lot of like the evacuations. So all this happened on April 26th. Evacuations were like 2 days later. So April 27th, 1986, 2 p.m. After telling residents nothing about the disaster for some 36 hours, Soviet officials finally begin evacuating roughly 115,000 people from Pripyat, as well as nearby towns and villages. Residents informed it will be temporary and that they should pack only vital documents and belongings, plus some food. Soon after, however, an exclusion zone is set up around Chernobyl that prevents their return. April 28, 1986. Swedish air monitors detect a large amount of radiation in the atmosphere, which is traced back to the USSR. Soviet officials admit that there's been an accident. but they falsely state the situation is under control. So yeah, it wasn't the Russians who told everyone we've had this issue. It was the Swedish who told everyone there's a lot of radiation right now. Where's this coming from? So yeah, they weren't even the ones that came out and said it. Yeah, it was although it doesn't state it there, Swedish air monitors. It was actually a Swedish nuclear power plant whose devices were going off because of high radiation. So they thought they were having a leak or a meltdown or something, which it wasn't even close to them. It was miles away from them. April 29th, 1986, spy satellite photos provide US officials with their first glimpse of the devastation wrought by the Chernobyl disaster. May 1st, 1986, Soviet officials refused to cancel the May Day festivities in Kiev, even as radiation continues to be released unabated. May 4th, 1986, liquid nitrogen is pumped underneath a dead reactor in order to cool it. Other aspects of the cleanup, which involves up to 800,000 workers, include bulldozing contaminated vehicles, shooting contaminated pets and livestock, and burying huge amounts of contaminated topsoil. Which, yeah, those... I think it's those guys that were known as the liquidators. Or I think... I can't remember if it was 800,000 that were known as liquidators, or if it was the guys that went onto the roof. They may have been the same ones, I can't quite remember. May 6, 1986, radioactive emissions drop sharply, possibly because the fire in the core has burned itself out. So yeah, it happened April 26th. The fire wasn't out until May 6th. That fire be going on for some time. May 8th, 1986, workers finished draining about 20,000 tons of radioactive water from the basement under the core. And then, yeah, they begin building the sarcophagus. So, May 9th, 1986, workers begin pouring concrete under the reactor, which is later encased in an enormous concrete and metal structure known as the sarcophagus. May 14th, 1986, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev speaks publicly about the incident for the first time that's like 3 weeks later, saying on state TV that the worst is behind us. August 25th to the 29th, 1986, the International Atomic Energy Agency hosts a conference at which scientists blame the accident not just on human error and a subpar safety culture, but also on Soviet reactor design flaws. December 15, 2000, so we've had a bit of a jump here. Unit 3, the last working reactor at Chernobyl, is shut down. Units 1 and 2 had been shut down in 1996 and 1991 respectively. April 2006, Gorbachev writes that the Chernobyl disaster even more... Gorbachev writes... Oh my god, my brain just went. Gorbachev writes that the Chernobyl disaster, even more than my launch of perestroika, was perhaps the real cause of the collapse of the Soviet Union. So yeah, that's just a kind of a glance over the history. There are a lot of facts in there that we could dive into. But look at it this way, Chernobyl's popularity went through the roof. It did. There is a fact in there that after HBO did the Chernobyl series, visits to the Chernobyl exclusion zone went up by 40%. Because you can visit, you can do tours, guided tours around the exclusion zone. And yeah, their numbers went up by 40%. So yeah, some of the facts. I'm trying to go through there's some very detailed ones here. So, radioactive iodine is the first killer. After the blast, the real killers come in the form of radioactive isotopes transmitted by dust particles floating through the air and falling to the ground. In the Chernobyl series, the lead scientist calls these bullets. So he's like, I'm trying to remember some lines. It's like 1,000 bullets every hour, or something along those lines. So yeah, radioactive iodine is one of the most dangerous because it can quickly be accumulated in the thyroid gland, leading to thyroid cancer and death. If you have enough natural iodine stored in your thyroid, then radioactive iodine won't accumulate. But if people are starved of natural iodine, like those who live in areas of iodine-poor soils, they are particularly at risk. This is why the relief efforts begin by giving iodine pills to people in affected areas, trying to prevent accumulation of radioactive iodine in their bodies. Fortunately, iodine 131 has a half-life of only 8 days, so the threat does not pose a long-term problem. I'm trying to remember what they nicknamed it. When you have I think it's thyroid gland operation to remove the cancer and stuff like that. I think it's around here. I might be wrong. I literally saw an image of this like a few hours ago. They gave it because it was so popular with occurring in those who lived in Pripyat and the surrounding locations. They gave the scar a nickname. Because yeah, it's been around here. They gave it the nickname of the Chernobyl necklace. Because they would leave a scar where you kind of would wear a necklace. So yeah, there's one of the facts. One of the many facts. There's a few facts that I came across which weren't facts. There's one here that says nobody lives in Chernobyl. That's incorrect. There's about 130 to 170 people who do live in Chernobyl, even though it's illegal to live in Chernobyl. Majority of these people are 70s, 80s. And yeah, that's because a lot of them had nowhere else to go. They may not have had any family left. They may have lived in the house around Chernobyl for their entire life, and it's the only thing they had. So a lot of them, well, not a lot of them, but a lot of the ones who did go back were of that older age group because it's all they had. And the Russian government didn't help them out too much. Another fact that people don't realize, although they think they can still kind of get effects from it, you can still die from radiation in Chernobyl. There's still enough. There's hot spots of radiation. There's pockets of radiation dotted across the zone, which have enough there to kill you. Obviously, not if you're in the area short enough time, you can get out minor effects. So yeah, some of the cracks and stuff found in Pripyat, where dust particles, radioactive dust particles have accumulated, they can be hotspots. The Red Forest, that's also a big spot where a lot of the fallout had been buried, so that's quite a big hotspot. Yeah, there's areas where they could stand there for about 4 hours, and would only get minor effects. Other areas where it'd be less time, they would get minor effects. So it kind of depends on where you are at the point. And then yeah, Greenpeace, they came out with quite a few different facts. So I don't know how many of these are completely true. Some of these seemed a little biased to me. So yeah, radioactive rain fell as far away as Ireland, but radioactive dust was being picked up in eastern US, so that shows just how far that can travel. Ukraine, Belarus and Russia were the most affected countries. 63% of the radioactive fallout from Chernobyl hit them three. I think out of those three, Belarus was the most affected. In terms of land space, I think. And yeah, since the city of Pripyat was evacuated, a lot of animals actually moved in. So wild horse, boars, dogs, beavers, wolves. Although apparently the whole thing about radioactive massive wolves in Chernobyl, that's also a myth. There's no massive wolves there. And the closer that the animals' homes, burrows, or whatever, or just general goings on, that the closer that is to the nuclear power plant, the more likely that they are to have
welcome to the fight, brother,
or mutations. Thank you for the follow, Yo de Kronman. Welcome to stream, my friend. We're just going through Chernobyl facts and myths. I've just been through the history of it all, the timeline of it all, from when the event happened. And yeah, another big fact that I mentioned briefly before that not many people realised: the power plants were still running up until 2000. A lot of people thought, okay, they've had this massive explosion, they've shut everything down, power plant's dormant, not used, being deconstructed or whatever. But no, the last reactor to get shut down was in 2000. So, whilst they were not deconstructing, but partly deconstructing and fixing and encasing reactor 4, the other 3 reactors were running. They had people going into work, whilst a few doors away, this reactor was killing people. It's me from our Disco Bro. Love the podcast. Thank you, bro. Also, another thing that people didn't realise, this wasn't the first issue that Chernobyl had. I think it was 1982 or 3. Reactor 1 had a part meltdown, which they fortunately managed to obviously sort out, seeing as not many people know about it, and we don't go on about Reactor 1 blowing up a few years earlier. Yeah, many people thought, okay, well, this is the first time they come across this issue, so maybe they just hadn't experienced this issue before. They had a slightly different way, but they definitely come across this kind of issue before, in the very same power plant. I think they had a couple of issues in the past with other power plants dotted across Russia. Because, yeah, they all had this kind of faulted design, which I can't remember how long after it was Chernobyl, or if it was after the lead scientist committed suicide and released his notes. If it was after one of those that they retroactively changed the design of all these fail-safe systems that were flawed, so that they were actually safe and actually fixed the problem instead of blowing it up. So yeah, I mentioned the Red Forest before. And yeah, they kind of dug a lot of the fallout underneath that. It's called the Red Forest because basically the radiation just killed off so many of the trees in there. So they just went into this pale red dead pine. So it got nicknamed the Red Forest. You can actually go into the Red Forest on Stalker. I'm trying to remember which one it is. It may be Shadow of Chernobyl, or maybe in Clear Skies as well, or it may have just been Clear Skies. I'm trying to remember. Because I played Call of Chernobyl, which is basically an overhaul mod for Call of Pripyat, which brings in all the areas from all the games. I lose track of which areas were from which games specifically. Can't decide, should I make him mess around with Browny by making a 1 penny donation? Okay. I'm trying to remember which facts I've been through and which ones I haven't. Okay, so for anyone who has seen the HBO series, there's a firefighter and his wife that we follow a lot of the story of. I think the firefighter was called Vasily Ignatenko. He was one of the first responders on the scene when it first happened. And yeah, he was exposed to a lot of radiation, a huge amount of radiation, which he died excruciating death 2 weeks later after the explosion. Yeah, coughing up his own internal organs and suffering from other ailments as well caused by the radiation. So when he died and it was his funeral and his wife was burying him, his body was so deformed and swollen that his shoes wouldn't fit. A majority of his clothing wouldn't fit around his body, which I'm sure was an absolute horrendous sight to see your husband in when burying him. Not that you want to bury your husband anyway, you don't want to bury any loved one, but having to bury them and then see them like that. And yeah, his body was so radioactive, they do show this in the HBO series, that he had to be buried in a zinc coffin and then concrete poured on the top of his coffin. It wasn't, and the HBO series, it wasn't just him. There was 5 or 6 coffins that they were all zinc. They all get lowered into the, and it's like a concrete slab on the bottom. They lower the coffins onto it, and then they poured concrete over the top of them. So yeah, it wasn't even like a proper, here's a nice spot to bury your husband. It was just, your husband's going in this brick, and we're going to pour more concrete on top of him. And then yeah, a lot of these are saying that it's illegal to live in Chernobyl, like I mentioned before, and it's about 130 to 170 people have moved back into the zone. Depending on who you talk to, people either call it the zone of alienation or the exclusion zone. I know it more as the exclusion zone, or just the zone, mainly from playing Stalker. And then there was an estimated 100,000 to 200,000 abortions that were performed on women after the incident occurred. Basically because the doctors told them that their babies had been exposed to a lot of radiation and they were most likely going to be born with defects. And then yeah, there was also radiophobia, so people were getting these done purely because they were scared of it. They didn't want to give birth to child with defects. They didn't want to see their child basically have a very shortened life expectancy and not be able to live a proper life. So yeah, some of them were told, your child won't come out in a humane way or whatever. It will come out with defects, it will have a shortened life, it will have many health issues. It's best for you just to abort it. Even though there was no proof of that, but there have been cases of it. And then yeah, there's a few stories which are a bit tear-jerking to read. When the people of Pripyat were being evacuated, and obviously they've been given so much short notice, they were told that they couldn't take their pets. And there's stories given where they'd be driving off in the buses and stuff, and pet dogs and stuff would be chasing these buses for I think some stories say 20-30 minutes before they gave up, and these dogs would just be howling, not as like a fun howl, but that heart-melting, tear-jerking, sad howl that you sometimes hear dogs do from like films and stuff. And then yeah, when the 800,000 came in, some of them had the task of shooting these dogs because they had so much radiation on them. They didn't want them to spread. They didn't want them to get out of the zone. So yeah, a lot of these dogs were shot. Not all of them, because you still have wild dogs wandering around, which some say that they were from back when it happened, and they've obviously had families bred and whatever. although a lot of them don't live past the age of 6 because they die from the radiation. So obviously they're living in Chernobyl, they're living in the exclusion zone, so they're having that constant exposure to the radiation that's still there. During the first 5 years after the accident, cancer in children increased by more than 90% in Ukraine alone. Jesus. Some of these facts are crushing to read. Probably not the most, not the easiest podcast episode to listen to, but I find Chernobyl strangely interesting. I don't know. I think it's because I really enjoyed the Stalker series. It's just that whole. It's a very unique story, and it's kind of like a survivalistic story, which I've always been into survivalistic stories. I love reading like World War One, World War Two hero stories, where it's them against the odds. Which I could maybe do a couple of episodes, podcast episodes on a couple of stories here and there from what I've come across whilst reading into World War history. Yeah, what other facts were there? I think I've read a lot of these ones. A lot of the facts get repeated on other pages. 200 tons of radioactive material is still inside the reactor, and the whole world is trying to find out the solution of what to do with it. Now, I think this article is actually old. It's not going to date on it, which is always helpful. Because in 2016, they brought in the, I forgot what to call it, new confinement dome or something like that. I get the feeling that your Chernobyl is mine. Yeah, a little bit. I mean, when Stalker 2 comes out, and if it's as good as I'm hoping it will be, I will be streaming the hell out of that. Just so everyone knows. If you see me stream for like 5 days straight, where it's just Stalker, don't have a go at me, I've warned you now. There's no release date on that yet, but it's next year. They've said that. They just haven't narrowed it down to a specific day or month. So yeah, all this radioactive material is still there. They brought in the new dome in 2016, I think it was. Basically because the sarcophagus at that point was falling apart. It was leaking. There was cracks forming everywhere. Parts of the roof were apparently falling in. That sarcophagus was only supposed to last about 30 years from when it was first constructed to when it would just be void. It would be unfit for purpose. So yeah, 30 years, 26, pretty much exact. So I'm guessing it was falling apart a little bit, a couple years sooner than that. Because yeah, it had been a. Oh, actually, this is saying that it was only meant to last 20 years. Okay, I've read some places say 30 to 35 years. This one's apparently saying 20. So yeah, it was 10 years late, apparently, according to this at least. So yeah, this new confinement dome's gone over the top, and now they're basically deconstructing that reactor number 4, and I think after that they will move on to the other reactors. And then just kind of deconstruct the whole plant. But I don't know what they're doing with the waste. I haven't read what they're doing with all the parts that they're taking out of it. It would be interesting to know what they're doing with all that and where it goes, because I don't know what the hell you do with radioactive stuff, especially on that level. Because you've still got the elephant's foot in there, which a lot of people who have heard a bit about Chernobyl will have probably heard of the elephant's foot. So when they were on about the the core melting down into the basement, which they had to empty all the water out of. That bit that was melting down, that is now known as the elephant's foot, because there's images dotted about where it looks like a foot. And then there's this famous image with a guy, a photographer, and a couple of workers at the time, just basically having this picture taken next to it. I think it's like the radiation or something is distorted this image, so that it kind of looks like there's a bit of soul being ripped out of one of the workers there, which is harrowing to see. But yeah, at the time, if you stood next to it for, I think it's 60 seconds, it will give you enough radiation to kill you. I think now it's if you stand next to it for 500 seconds, it'll give you that same level of radiation. So yeah, you can't really go next to that thing. So I don't know how they're working to remove that, unless they're keeping that there until it is at a level that is safe to be removed. But apparently the life of the elephant's foot is 100,000 years. They say that people will be able to move back into the Chernobyl area and it'll be livable in, some places say 1,000, some places say 10,000. I think 10,000 is a more realistic figure, because I think it was the most commonly occurring figure that was coming up. But I don't get how that would work if the elephant's foot's still there for like 90,000 years after apparently it's livable to move back in. Unless they might be able to like encase it some more. Obviously they've got the dome in there, but I don't know how good that is at stopping any radiation from getting out. What other facts have we got? Oh yeah, one of the other ones was, it mentions this in the HBO series. When they were clearing out the basement, the water in the basement, they basically sent 3 workers down there to work on the pipes to flood out this water. Because if this core melted through and hit the water, apparently it would cause a explosion, which a lot of people say wasn't true because of the way that it melts down. It doesn't melt down as like one flat layer. It would be more like it would melt through the concrete unevenly, so you get a drop here, a drop there. It wouldn't just be this all melts down at the same level and it all plops through at the same time. If it did it like that, yes, it probably would have caused a huge explosion. But the way they're saying, with it being uneven, it would be smaller explosions. I don't know if it would be enough level to cause a lot of damage to the local area. They're saying if it did it all at once, it would be enough to wipe out or make unlivable a 300 kilometer radius, which the exclusion zone is 30 kilometer radius, I think. So yeah, it would affect 10 times the amount from that potential explosion. But yeah, they sent these three people down. They got all the water out, and a lot of people say that these 3 people died within weeks after doing this job because of the radiation. Not true. From reports that I've read and what they mentioned on the HBO series, I think it's 2 are still alive, and one of them died years later from when they were reported to have died 3 weeks after the incident. So yeah, that's Suicide Squad, as they're nicknamed. It wasn't so much a Suicide Squad. I mean, yes, it was a very dangerous mission that they were given. And whilst they were all expected to die, very soon after, they didn't. I had a point to lead up that one with, but I can't remember what it was now. Nope, it's gone. And yeah, when all these firefighters from who were fighting the fires from the explosion, when they were all being sent to the hospital, when they were having burns and stuff coming up, which people didn't realise what the hell it was going on. Once they got to the hospital, the doctors and nurses there kind of knew, okay, these are radiation burns. There is a lot of radiation on these guys' clothing, and they took all the clothes and the boots and whatever that they were wearing, that the firefighters were wearing, and took them down to the hospital's basement, and they're still there to this day, and they are still incredibly radioactive, because they are covered in granite particles, radioactive particles, everything from that initial explosion and fighting the fires. So yeah, they're still there to this day. There's a lot of videos on YouTube of people who've gone and done the tours, and I think some of the maybe unofficial tours, or some of those who've got that little backhand payment, have been able to go down to this basement and take pictures of the clothing from a distance. Obviously, they won't let them go and pick the stuff up, because that would just be stupid. But yeah, there are a few videos online of people who've gone and seen the firefighters' clothing. A lot of them as well. There's from the game, those who go unofficially. Because yeah, you can go in with a tour guide, but you can't go in without an official person there or whatever. You can't go in on your own, basically. But there are people known as stalkers who go to the zone, which is obviously based on the game. They got nicknamed stalkers because there's a lot of cases where people go in illegally without any tour guide or anything, just walking on their own. And go and visit all these different sites, and yeah, they got nicknamed stalkers. So there's videos from them where they go into those illegal or not recommended sites, just because of how radioactive they are. Also, if anyone does love Chernobyl history and Chernobyl games, definitely check out Chernobyl at the minute. I think it's still in early access. A lot of it is still being worked on, but they've been to do tours around Chernobyl to take pictures so they can make a photorealistic version of the zone in the game. It would be cool if they did like a virtual experience where it's not got the game aspects to it. It's just you tour around Chernobyl freely, because yeah, in Chernobyl, like, it's typical Fallout radioactive game. You go up against mutants, you go up against other people, soldiers and stuff like that. I would also love a game that lets you be like a fly on the wall from different perspectives of the disaster when it happens. So you could be like watching them as it unfolds in the control room, and then maybe one above the power plant when it explodes and stuff like that, and one in the reactor room and stuff. So you can kind of live that experience without having to be there. That would be a great VR experience. It would be a great VR experience. I mean, I don't have VR, so it wouldn't be great for me, but anyway. What other facts were there? Oh yeah, when they were doing the whole pouring in the boron and stuff using the helicopters, one of the myths, which I was corrected on recently as well, when I read this at least, because yeah, I thought the helicopter crash that occurred, I thought that was because they went over the reactor and were blasted with that much radiation. It screwed up all the mechanics of the helicopter and caused it to crash. Not entirely true. They it does show this in the HBO series, but there is also real footage of it when it happened it clips one of the cranes next to the opening to the reactor, and that's what causes it to crash, not the radiation. I mean, the radiation may have had some sort of input into it. I don't know, maybe affecting the pilot, who may not have been able to see properly or something. I don't know. But yeah, it was they clipped a crane, which was actually what caused them to crash, not the radiation. I felt it when the blade sheared off. Yep. To be honest, the real life footage I thought was better than the HBO footage. I think the real life showed it more clearly that it was hitting the crane. Because I'm trying to remember the real footage. It's been a little while since I watched it. The real footage, I don't think it shows it going through the smoke coming out of the reactor. Whilst in the series, it shows it going through the smoke. And then it just comes out. And then if you're not properly focused, you wouldn't realise that it's hit this crane. Because it hits the wire hanging down, which I think in the real footage, I can't remember if it just clips the end of the framework of the crane, or if it hits the cable. I want to say it hits just the end of the framework. And then in the HBO series, it hits the wire that's hanging down. So you don't see the crane move, but if you're watching closely enough, you see the hook that's on that crane's wire. You see that fall down. But you really have to be focusing to be able to see that. Otherwise, you just see the rotor and stuff fall off of the helicopter, or shear off, or whatever. So yeah, that was a thing that everyone's like, oh, well, this helicopter was affected by all this radiation, and that caused it to crash and explode. When no, it was not the radiation; it was them flying into a crane. Not like I say flying into a crane. They didn't go flying straight into the thing. They literally clipped part of it. There was machinery on site that did get affected by the radiation, though. When they were doing clearing the rooftop of all the granite that was left from the explosion, they initially wanted to use machinery, robots, basically, to that they could remote operate and push the granite back into the reactor room, so then they could put the sarcophagus over the top. And yeah, they put these robots up there, and they did not last long before the radiation fried their electronics. So I don't know. I'm trying to remember the reports. I think some of them they lost control of, and then the robot would just drive itself into the reactor room, or drive itself off the side of the building. I don't know if they had to pull these down, or if they just pushed them into the reactor room as well, because once they'd been up there for a few minutes, they'd got enough radiation on them that they would never be able to use them again. There's junkyards set up around Chernobyl that are just filled with all these different vehicles and machinery that they used during the construction and general aftermath of the disaster. So yeah, they're just left there now. They can't be used. They're too radioactive. They're too unsafe to be used. So yeah, they're just dotted around the place, rotting, left to rot. I can imagine today not so much, but then they wouldn't have had any protection. The transmitters definitely wouldn't have worked properly. No, I mean, anything that they used, including the people, did not have enough protection. I don't know how realistic the HBO series was in terms of them literally getting any LED panels they could. The 800,000 people that went to work there, literally scrapping any LED panel that they could to put on themselves. There's a podcast done by the guys who directed and made the HBO series that basically they go through saying, okay, this was true, this wasn't true. One of the things that a lot of people who've watched the Chernobyl series get confused about is the female scientist character. She wasn't real. She was basically made by the writers of the series to act on behalf of all the thousands of other scientists that were involved with the Chernobyl disaster. Because obviously them trying to add in every single scientist or many different scientists who played a key role, it would have added too many characters, it would have got confusing, so they kind of accumulated them all into this one character who they then used to portray all the input and various information that was brought up by these other scientists. What was I saying beforehand? I can't remember. Oh yeah, the figures from Chernobyl are hard to get a true figure for, especially the death figure from the event. I think the Russian official figure is 32 deaths caused by the incident, but these are literally a lot of people who died within weeks after the incident. This is not taking account people who were affected by the radiation over a long term. So the people of Pripyat, they're not really taken into consideration. All the people that died from cancers and the miscarriages and all that sort of stuff that occurred, they weren't counted. They weren't seen as the official figure. So some sources say it's between 4,000 and 90,000 for the official death figure. But yeah, that's a big range to pick from. I'm trying to remember what other facts there were. I've been reading this quite a bit recently. I think I've gone through a lot of them. In terms of like the radioactive rate from the initial explosion, they say it's 400 times more radioactive, or the fallout was 400 times more radioactive than the bombs that were dropped by the US on the Japanese in World War II. So that gives you a bit of a grasp just how radioactive this thing was, which is just crazy to think of. And then other small facts like the birds around Chernobyl have significantly smaller brains than those living in non-radiation poisoned areas. I mean, that gives a new definition to bird brain. I don't know if that's a common insult outside the UK. I know in the UK, if someone does something stupid, you'd be like, "Oh my god, you bird brain." And yeah, it's just like an insult to say you're stupid or whatever. Yeah, it mentions the sarcophagus, of which he was cracking and everything. I think I've been through a lot of them. Oh yeah, 28 firefighters and cleanup workers died within 3 months of Chernobyl disaster, all from acute radiation sickness. So maybe I was a bit off with 32. Unless there was other ones that no one isn't mentioning. The first person to die in the Chernobyl accident was Valery Kodymchuk, a plant worker who was monitoring the water pumps to the nuclear core. I can't remember if this is the same guy who's basically still there. His remains were never recovered because they are in the reactor's rubble. Because yeah, there was in the reactor room, I think there was a guy in a catwalk, which maybe this guy, I can't remember off the top of my head, who was caught in the explosion. That initial explosion when the reactors blew up. It went straight into him, so he's still there. I mean, obviously he's probably completely decayed by now, or I don't know what the decay rate is of human. I've never looked into that. That's a little bit of a weird fact to look into, but anyway. yeah, his remains are still there. He was never recovered. There was no chance they'd be able to recover his remains with where he was left. Because yeah, he was. I mean, he was probably his remains were probably burned. I'm guessing with the fires that what happened. But yeah, there was no chance that they were going to get to him safely enough, or even get close to him to be able to get his remains out, so that he could at least be buried, and his loved ones could kind of have be able to lay him to rest, basically. The doctor who had left the city the night before the bombs had dropped hurried back, and on his way came across a black figure making its way in his direction, and it collapsed. It got off his bicycle, his first reaction being to check for a pulse, only there wasn't any skin for him to hold. Yeah, that they do mention some of the firefighters from Chernobyl. Their skin would turn black, and it would just be like swelling, and there'd be cracks opening in the skin. I don't even know how you explain what radiation on the skin would feel like. I mean, I'm guessing it would feel like a sunburn 1,000 times worse. I mean, I've had bad sunburns where it just feels like your skin is constantly on fire, but yeah, just like times that by 1,000 to the point where it kills you. And yeah, well, according to the firefighter account, makes you just, your insides just burn themselves and fall to bits, and then you just cough it all up. I think I may have been through all the facts that I know of researched from Chernobyl. There's probably other facts that I do know, just that aren't springing to mind at the minute. I would love to. Part of me would love to go and do the official tour, but the other side of me would be like, I don't want to go to a place that has radiation. Even though where they take you, it's not lethal amount. And they do give you like Geiger counters and stuff, so you take that around. You have it. I think you wear it like a necklace, and then it kind of monitors it over time and keeps a log of how much radiation you had. And then when you get back after your tour, you give it to some officials. They take the log. They make sure you haven't received too much. If you receive too much, they make you go to the local hospital, and they'll do assessments on you from there. But yeah, the Geiger counters that I had when it initially went off were unsuitable for that kind of situation. It was like I'm trying to remember what they said in the series. It would read a max of 3 Ronkin or something like that. The ones on site when it initially happened would read that much, and then after the morning after such, when they got more equipment in, they had ones that would read higher, but even those completely burnt out. Basically, there were very few of them which would actually read the correct measure, because they just hadn't been built to read that much. It would just fry the system. It would max it out. I can't remember what the official figure was. Let me see if I can quickly Google it. I think it was in the tens of thousands. I don't even know how you spell Ronkin. Or if that was even the correct word. That's how you spell it. Röntgen. We're later to learn the real level was 15,000 Röntgen. Twice the... Okay, this is saying twice the radiation the Hiroshima bomb. Released every hour. The instruments at Chernobyl could only read as high as 3.6. So yeah, their equipment was not made for that. Which I don't get. Why you would have equipment that reads so low at the planet itself. Could I understand like selling them to nearby people to ease their concerns for when it's not going off. But yeah, I think I've gone through pretty much all the facts I know of from Chernobyl. I think as it gets closer to the Stalker 2 release, I'll probably do a real Chernobyl versus Stalker Chernobyl history. I think up until the event it's the same, and then after the event, I think it's like 2000 plus. The histories are altered so that the Stalker lore is adapted basically, so that it fits in the different factions, the mutants, the emissions, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I think that's all my Chernobyl just exploded out of my head. Because that was a crap pun to use. If that was even a pun, I don't know. So yeah, we're gonna hop into some Fallout 4, which is a very fitting game after talking about nuclear disasters. See what shenanigans we're gonna get up to in there. I might do a little bit more work on the sanctuary settlement. I forgot what the bloody word was. And then see where it goes from there. So, whilst I get that set up, I am going to let you, glorious people, watch an advert. Which I'm sure you're going to thoroughly enjoy when I get into the... Okay, Twitch, let me into the back end of the stream, please. Okay, so yes, we'll be back in just a moment. Let me get Joshua back on whilst all this goes on. Right, I'll be back in a moment.